Hello and welcome to the Service Ducks podcast. I am co-host James Downs.
And I'm Russ here, and we're here to chat about all things ServiceNow, everyday life as a ServiceNow consultant, new features, implementation successes, and perhaps more entertaining when it doesn't go quite so well. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Service Ducks podcast. So today we are going to be talking about CSDM. So what's that? Common Services Data Model. We're going to be talking about that and what's the point. Why bother with CSDM? But before we do that, let's find out what we've been up to. James, talk to us. What have you been doing? What's new?
Well, it's been a little while. Obviously we've had the Christmas period and New Year. Do you know what?
People don't know when we record these, do they?
No, they don't know. Even though we had one come out on the 4th, this little in secret, we had that ready before Christmas. So this is our first recording since Christmas. Yes.
Yeah,
true.
We were organised last year.
True, but I don't know many people who had got through the Christmas period without being sick. So my whole family was sick all the way through till New Year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Everyone I know, apart from me, luckily I escaped it, but no, everyone I know has unfortunately been ill. Yeah, so I think you're right.
Yeah, so other than being ill, my big things really was about what's happening this year. So, I've got a couple of events coming up which I can, I guess, share with the listeners. Not too exciting, but well, one thing is that obviously I think we all know we're into running, and last year I did my very first half marathon, which I nearly killed over and died afterwards.
Yeah, well, that's part of the course, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this time, I've got another one booked for May, the Great Manchester Run. So I've got a little bit of a program leading up to it, and very much looking forward to trying out making it through, and being able to feel my legs afterwards. That'd be quite nice.
Are you following like a training plan for that one? Schedule?
Yeah. Well, my own kind of schedule.
Hashed together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever you find out on YouTube, some very good, obviously, channels out there to get some hints and tips from. Some of them shared by yourself, of course. So,
I too died on my half marathon. I have lived the pain.
Yes. It is definitely a challenge.
That's why I don't do them anymore.
No, 10K seems to be the nice distance where you can actually enjoy a run. Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other news really is more on a professional level, I guess, is that
It's not all professional. People don't come here for professional.
They come here for blabber.
They come here for waffle
gossip
about Cristiano Ronaldo and Dennis Irwin. Yeah, go on.
It's a very Man United themed, isn't it? So I'm recording a video series to do with no code. So I know you're
there's a plug.
I was going to say you're pro no code. The difference to this no code series, as you could probably presume, it's building a custom app using App Engine Studio, but all the requirements will come from Chat GPT. So you almost have your kind of business user in front of you being Chat GPT, who's generating your stories, generating your business requirements and objectives and things like that. So that's what makes it a little bit different, a little bit fun. Yes.
Interesting. So for those of you who've been under a rock for the last 2 months, you may not have heard of Chat GPT or may not understand what it is. All I would say is Service Nerd channel, YouTube, that's mine. I did do a video on it, explains what it is and kind of puts a little bit of ServiceNow sauce on top. But essentially, it's an AI chatbot-y type thing that you can ask it questions and it converses with you in kind of a human type way. I think that's all we're going to mention on that. We'll mention something at the end, actually, something potentially quite exciting. But that's all we'll go into on that at the moment, I think. We could create a podcast series just on that, I think.
Absolutely. Yep. Very exciting.
So what else? What else?
Well, other than that, we've got. I managed to get tickets to the Silverstone British Grand Prix in July. So that's going to be really exciting. Tickets in the grandstands.
That is exciting, but here's a more exciting question. Do you say Silverstone Silverstone?
Oh. I guess unconsciously I just say Silverstone. Stone.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Is that correct?
And
I don't know if that's correct.
I think that's the name, isn't it? That's the name. It is Silverstone.
Silverstone.
Just think, if you're not based in the UK, you may not know what we're talking about. It's a race circuit. But it's one of those stupid English things that you kind of spell one way and perhaps pronounce another way. I always say Silverstone. I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Don't think there is a right or wrong. Anyway, we're waffling. We're digressing.
Yeah. So what have you been up to, Russ? And what's your 2023 plans?
Oh my God. Let's not go through all my goals for 2023. I've got loads. But sticking on the running theme, I too have an event coming up. In fact, mine's coming up on Sunday.
Ooh.
And it is a horrible 5K. I actually know the circuit, and it's mainly uphill for the first 2K.
Oh.
It's horrible. I'm not looking forward to it. And we're going through a really cold snap in the UK at the minute.
Yeah.
And it's freezing out there. And if you're not inside the UK, you may think what we're classing as freezing is just like T-shirt weather, but it's cold, and I hate it, and I just don't want to go. But I'm going to do it anyway because it sets my time for the year. And this week, and it sounds like a stand-up, this, doesn't it? What have you been up to this week? What have you got coming up?
Any blockers?
This week, I have been fiddling around with UI Builder and the Service Operations Workspace.
Better you than me.
Right, and I'm going to have a little rant now, right?
Yeah, go on.
So,
go on.
I know about it, obviously. I've always needed a use case to play with it. Like many new things, it's not new, but many things with ServiceNow, you want a use case to go and fiddle with it. You need to get your hands dirty. Do you know what I mean? And I've got that at the minute. And low code it ain't. I don't care what they say. And you mentioned low code app or whatever.
Yep.
From the stuff that the customer's asking to do, you push back and you ask the questions why, what you're trying to achieve. But sometimes code is unavoidable. But as much as I'm having a little bit of a rant about it, and it is quite clunky. I've noticed when you save stuff, you have to save it about or refresh about 4 times for it to actually show on screen. A bit annoying. But it's given me an opportunity to understand the architecture behind it, which is great. So I now know more than I did. And do I like it? I do like it, actually. It does some funky stuff. And I'm quite pleased it allows me to get my hands dirty with some code as well.
Yeah, I heard on the grapevine.
There's a grapevine. There's a ServiceNow grapevine, apparently.
On the rumour mill.
Yeah, on the rumour mill.
That UI Builder's getting some kind of facelift. I don't know whether I don't know if it's just enhancements to it or a complete replacement.
Can you say that out loud? Or do we have to do some kind of disclaimer?
We will preamble safe harbour notice.
Right, okay.
That
statement
I was right there. Like I say, I mentioned rumour mill.
Yeah.
It's a rumour, everybody.
If you haven't played with it yet, not you, but anyone that's listening to this, if you haven't played with UI Builder yet, I would just say get yourself a use case to have a play with. Get yourself a good use case to have a play with. And don't make it something that is never going to happen. So how many times have you been in a situation where the customer looks and goes, yeah, I'll have that. It's always, I'll have that. But actually, can you put like that moon on top of the stick with some flashy lights on top for me? So get one of those scenarios and get yourself a reason to have a play. So that's what I've been doing. That's
Very
me.
nice.
I think enough waffle. Let's give the people something they actually turned up for, given that the title is CSDM.
Yes.
What's the point? CSDM, Common Service Data Model. What is the point? So go on then, James. In fact, I'll tell you what. Let's flip this kind of format slightly on its head. So tell us what ServiceNow deems it's. What is the CSDM? You're allowed to read off a screen for this if you want to, but what does ServiceNow tell us the CSDM is?
Well, ServiceNow tells us that, well, actually, if you have a look at the likes of the white papers and, documents out there, what you're going to find is huge essays. They're going to find debate. Yeah, exactly. You can find such huge descriptions of what CSDM is, and I think that's partly its problem. What ServiceNow will describe it is obviously a split of common service and data model. So, a standard, this is my quoting now, a standard and shared set of service-related definitions across our products and platform, and the data model bit being a CMD framework across our products and platform that will enable support and multiple configuration strategies. Now, I have a completely different explanation of what
so that just sounds
CSDM
a lot of marketing
is.
guff, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Okay, so let's cut through that rubbish.
Yeah. So my explanation of what CSDM is, and I think this is really important when you're having conversations with customers as well, because they also don't want to hear all the rubbish.
And
They're not going to
that's true,
understand it.
actually.
And yeah, they just want layman's terms. What is it? How are we going to benefit from it?
Yeah,
are we not doing it
that's
already?
very true. I think customers are wise to the marketing guff. I know they are, because I've been in that situation where they have said to me, I don't want the sales pitch, right? Or the marketing spiel.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. From when CSDN came into fruition, a lot of customers I spoke to, it's like, great, we've listened to the slide deck, we've watched the ServiceNow videos, but we still don't get it. Talk to us normally.
Exactly.
So yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think a lot about CSDM is conversations. My explanation of it is a very much cut down version of it. So CSDM is guidelines, or a framework you could call it, that standardizes data structures and relationships in ServiceNow. That's it.
Yes, I'd go with that. I
actually prefer your explanation. Which I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, but mine is just making sure things are in the right place.
I think when I asked a couple of weeks ago, it tells you where to put stuff.
Yeah, it tells you where to put stuff. It's there to simplify the way data is stored and make it easier, and give you some guidelines. Because I think when ServiceNow first came out, for many, many years, we had the CMDB, and I hope if you're listening to this, you already understand what CMDB is. Otherwise, this first kind of 15 minutes has been utterly pointless.
Right,
I'll go and do something else.
Yep.
But when it first came out, the CMDB was almost like a data store, right? And we know it is a bit of a data store, but there wasn't any guidelines from ServiceNow on how to use it. So, how many times have you been at a customer where you've put in relationships, not really understanding, because you don't come from an infrastructure background or a configuration management background, and you put in relationships between entities. Application, perfect example. The class, the CMDB application class. Straight away, 5 years ago, if someone said to you an application class in the CMDB, what would you say? Microsoft Office. You'd say something like,
exactly.
Software, I don't know, an actual application that you can use, Audacity that we're using to do this podcast, perhaps. So people were putting data in the wrong places, albeit at the time they thought it was the right places, and therefore getting the relationships incorrect, because obviously you don't know what the relationships are.
Yeah, the other side to that as well is that ServiceNow, going back a few years, was very much for, advising customers that you can configure the platform, and you can choose where you put stuff, and it's just down to your own customization and your own visibility of the tool. Whereas to get ultimate value from ServiceNow, you're gonna want to try and be a bit more prescriptive and align to the way ServiceNow intends the data to be used, and the way it all pins together.
And I think that they've never had that before, because if we think about it, up until a few years back, ServiceNow was really IT focused, ITSM, ITIL focused.
Yes.
In fact, ITSM is probably incorrect, but ITIL focused, right? So your CMDB was something that underpinned those services. And again, if you haven't done ITIL, if you haven't done an ITIL course or got no understanding of what we're talking about, then I'd recommend you go and do an ITIL V4. And oh no, I don't think it's V4. I think it's just 4, ITIL 4. I don't think they like it when you say the V in front of it. But yeah, it was always ITS or ITIL focused. Now they've started branching out to things like field service or customer service, finance, HR. Name some others that we didn't get within our alphabet game back in Christmas. But now they've started doing that, they've got to recognize a common way of modeling your services that you can use them across those different applications. What I mean by that is if you've got an HR department that's consuming, that's on the platform, that's using the HR module, they are using the same service model perhaps as you're using in IT to create your things like outages or whatever. Against. And that allows you to have this kind of overall global visibility of your services across your estate. And I think that's the intention.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's to improve that kind of data consistency and accessibility for different sets of users and applications.
Yeah, that's it.
Hold on, did we just give a bigger explanation than what we just said the ServiceNow one was?
Yeah, I did actually. I did. I said mine was really simple, didn't I? But I was adding some context to it.
Absolutely. And that's definitely part of the challenges that comes with CSDM. Like we say, when you start having these conversations, from my experience anyway, with ServiceNow customers, they really struggle to grasp the definitions and what is a service, what is an application. You've got all these relationships, and it's just all too much. And obviously, that's is where ServiceNow has introduced like a maturity model, and obviously steps that you can follow to do bit by bit, and just make sure that you're on that journey of slowly improving your CMDB and relationships to each other. But obviously, this is still a really complex thing for them to take on. It's not going to happen overnight either. So you're not going to achieve a mature CMDB overnight. It's going to be something that's going to take time. It needs to be something that is roadmapped, and it needs to have the right people involved, which is probably the biggest takeaway I could mention. Is CSDM isn't a new thing, by the way. The concepts from CSDM is something that existed way back, even pre-2018 when ServiceNow brought this in. These were all kind of definitions and things that your enterprise architects, if you're lucky enough to have some of those, would know some of the concepts and things flying around CSDM already. It's just that ServiceNow has dressed this up as CSDM, and you'll see similar concepts come in TOGAF and IT for IT, for example.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned maturity a minute ago. Yeah. Before you went on a rant about architects. You're an architect, by the way. I can rant to you about those as well. What if... So do you just... Is it something... So we've explained what it is and gone on a little bit of a rant about CSDM. But is it something you just turn on? Do you just come into the application? Is there a CSDM application? Do you just come in and go, toggle button on, I'm done, and walk away? Is it... And I think you alluded to this before. It's not something you do overnight. So I'm assuming it's not a toggle button. Mm-hmm. So is it a road mapping exercise? If so, where do you start? CSDM, it sounds... There might be people listening to this that have come to this and gone, oh, that looks like something that might help me in my CSDM journey. So we've prattled on about what it is, but how do you get on that journey? What do you do?
Yeah, so obviously the ServiceNow answer is to follow the maturity model, like you mentioned. And yes, there is some plugins that are going to help you. There is some data foundations dashboards which will show you the maturity model, which goes from setting up the likes of your foundational data to a crawl, walk, run, fly model.
Oh, marketing speak again.
I know. And what I would advise in that is not all of the little segments, within the CSDM model is going to apply to the business that you're talking to. So following that maturity model may not necessarily make sense. So again, my advice against this is, yes, you can turn on these plugins and it may help you start to at least think about or have the conversations about implementing CSDM. But you need to focus on the things that make sense to you, is my advice. Focus on maybe business services, you have an idea about those. In which case, yes, let's start with that. As long as you're having the conversations and you're starting to build towards this bigger picture, and I'm sure you know the picture I'm talking about showing the different CSDM domains in, about build and sell and technical services.
Yeah.
The big picture that when you show it to customers, they're like, whoa, this is just like spaghetti.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a model, CSDM 4.0. In fact, there's a funny thing on that. When CSDM 4.0 came on, I watched the ServiceNow, or I listened to the ServiceNow presentation on it, and it was a woman, and she was American, and she kept saying CSDM 4.0. And for about half a day, I thought there was something called Fordado. I was like, what's Fordado?
They started to give their releases names, yeah.
So CSDM Fordado, is this the new version? Don't know. But yeah, it's 4.0, 4.0.
So that's just completely alienated our US audience.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
Good job.
That's me. But yeah, so what you're saying is you mentioned the stages. So ServiceNow, not only are we saying ServiceNow are saying this is what CSDM is, and giving their marketing explanation, they've also done a nice kind of project journey marketing job as well, because they're telling us we've got different stages. Like, what did you mention? Foundation, crawl, walk, run, and fly. I don't know those off the top of my head. I've just Googled it quickly. I did know they existed though. But this is kind of different stages that you should go in your project, I guess, in your life cycle to get a mature CSDM. And I think if I'm being honest, I think some organizations will never get to full maturity with CSDM. I think it will be an ongoing thing. I think you'll get to run, perhaps come back to crawl. And what it says, and we'll put some links in the description if we've got such a thing in a podcast. But it says in each one of those kind of stages, that's what I'm going to call them. Each one of those stages, they recommend what to concentrate on. So, for example, do you concentrate on business services in walk, for example, or technical services and linking those to the CIs in perhaps crawl? Foundation, what's that? Well, that's got to be getting all your CIs in the right place, right? And then the rest has got to be relationship. So it does kind of set out that. So it's very, very helpful in terms of how we're doing that, how you manage that journey. Okay, so we've talked about what CSDM. We've talked about how to get started with it, or at least what's the journey to CSDM Nirvana. How do you migrate across? I say migrate, but how do you come up with your project? What kind of techie tools, what kind of nerdery have we got to migrate over to CSDM? You've already got your CMDB stuff in place, and you've now figured out, oh, Christ, it's in the wrong place. How do you migrate along? What would you say?
From my perspective, there is a few things in there that can help you. And again, this is going to come from conversations as well, because, okay, so you may have, for example, and a good example, because this is a recent one, that I had a customer who had, as you say, they had their CMDB populated, as many do, through like a discovery tool, maybe bringing in, their devices on a daily basis, and they manually manage their what they would call services, but in the generic services table. So not necessarily in the correct tables for CSDM to start properly managing application services. And then obviously this is that old chestnut. So you'll come across this a lot.
Yeah.
And yes, there are a few tools and nerdery out there that you can convert your services to the right version of application services to support that CSDM model. What I would urge is caution in just understanding what that means, because when you do that conversion, it depends whether you have like the likes of an ITOM license. So do you have service mapping? Do you intend to manage your services through service mapping in that route? Do you intend to do it through tag-based services or any other route, maybe still manual, but it needs to be in the right tables? So there's still a few choices and conversations that need to happen, and requirements gathering to understand, especially how these things will be managed, to understand how things will fit together and what the right tables should be. So, I think, yes, there's not a one button, I'm going to say. There's not a one button that says, let's all migrate to CSDM and it all goes in the right tables. It needs to be dealt with almost on a singular basis.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because that's kind of similar and feeds into what I was going to say, really. Because I think, first and foremost, And I often try and think of these things as, if this is my platform, if I own the platform, what would I do, right? So I think first and foremost, I'd understand the data I've currently got. Is it valid? Is it valid? Is it valuable? Do I want to maintain it? Because a lot of CMDB, you just got a load of guff in there that doesn't get managed, doesn't get maintained. You can just wipe off anyway. So I'd maybe think about that first. Anything that is valuable, I'd back up if I could, whether that's via spreadsheets, a centralized database, or just understanding I've got it somewhere else and I can get it back in. I'd probably do that. And then feed into what you were saying before is look at, these are the things I care about, and these are the attributes of the things that I care about, and now are they in the right place?
Yeah.
And if they're not in the right place, this is the right place to put them, and have I got the mandatory attributes to put them in those tables? Because we all know when you move CIs into the different tables or classes, I should have mentioned that before. Tables, classes, same. You've got different attributes per class, haven't you? So you've got different mandatory requirements, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'd look at that, and then I'd look at the dependencies between those classes that I'm interested in. That's probably what I would do in a nutshell.
What I would add as well is it's not just about the actual CI classes themselves. It's even the importance is also on the relationships. So it's not just about populating CIs and making sure it's in the right class.
It is. It's all about data. It's
just about data and the relationships between them, and make sure the right relationships are there, because you want the right bigger picture to show. You know, a lot of the new functionality that's going to come out with ServiceNow is going to be against these particular relationships that they've advised, or against these particular classes. So,
just I'm conscious of time. Just before we wrap up on this, I've got one more question around CSDM. Right. So we've discussed what is CSDM.
Yeah.
We've discussed what the journey is to becoming mature in CSDM, haven't we? We've discussed around kind of hints and tips around the techie nerdery stuff to get us on that journey. So who cares, right? So what? So all we're talking about right at the minute is we're talking about some data or the relationships between that data in ServiceNow, and it's a common service to data model. It's all great.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How can we consume it? How do we see it in the platform? How can I physically see and go, that's part of the CSDM? What does it mean?
Yeah. So what do you actually get out of it? What's the benefits? How can you realize value from it? So let's just think of it from a ITSM perspective. I think most of us are in favor of ITSM.
Yep.
And let's say, we've done so much work in getting our CMDB aligned. We've got our services in place. Fantastic. Everything all links up nicely. What does that actually mean? Okay. So if you think from the benefits that you can get from that are the likes of change management, for example. So if you have a particular CI which is obviously it's maybe being monitored and there's some form of outage. Let's say you need to create a change or incident off the back of that to understand its impact. So understanding its impact to the likes of the services, you're able to understand deeper in terms of where the root cause is. You're able to report deeper on the performance of these services because of their linkage back from all these relationships. So you're able to get true service level reporting. You're able to get a reduction in tickets because you're able to more accurately describe incidents and changes. A reduction in the meantime to resolve. That's just a few things that comes off the top of my head. So by having all these things together, ITSM and all connected, you're able to just work more efficiently.
Okay, that's good. So I think bits that I would add to that, and I'm keeping in mind of CSDM is across platform. So I'm kind of leaning more towards you've got HR, you've got finance there, you've got ITSM as well. What benefits do I get across those platforms? Well, you get total cost of ownership, wouldn't you? Oh, that's a proper management speak. But you get the total cost of that service, wouldn't you? Because that service is common across all those different functions. So finance, HR, IT. So I would say, you've got complete holistic visibility of your service across the organization. I would say that's a big plus. Yeah, I would also say if you wanted to purchase a new product from ServiceNow, so let's say they came out with a new, I don't know, bus scheduling app. I don't know.
Okay, yeah,
and you
good.
bought that. That would be using the common service data model as well, right? So if you're starting to adopt it now, you'd be ready to go with that. You wouldn't buy a new product. Telecoms, perfect example. You wouldn't buy a new product from ServiceNow and then go, oh no, we've got to restructure our services.
We have to redo all this.
Fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the major benefit for ServiceNow themselves. It allows them to be more dynamic and release products at speed.
That speed,
people can consume quickly.
Yeah, I love that point.
And I think that's one of the key things for me.
Yes. So we're saying you can determine how well an enterprise application is performing. You can identify affected services quickly through outage reduction sort of thing, consistent reporting, and you're kind of future-proofing yourself for any new products coming in. The fact that you don't need to redo what you've already done.
Yes, yeah, I'd go with that. So in order to kind of wrap things up here, we waffled on a bit about CSDM. To answer the original question, James, CSDM, what is the point? And you're not allowed to waffle on. Concise.
Adopting the CSDM in ServiceNow maximizes platform value through improved data consistency, cross-platform service performance visibility, and scalability for new products.
No, I'll go with that. I was going to give you two words: manageability and scalability.
Yeah, so you mentioned scale as well then. Yeah.
Yep. That was going to be
I wanted to make sure I had that in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yours is much more concise than mine. Yeah.
Yeah, because what people don't know, and they listen to me on this podcast, but I don't tend to waffle much, but you wouldn't think that.
You say that, you proved yourself wrong.
Yeah, I know, by the rubbish I absolutely talk on this. Okay, so we mentioned at the start around Chat GPT. We talked a little bit about that, and I part that to the end because I wanted to mention it towards the end. So I think what we should tell people, James, is on the next podcast, hopefully, we'll be lining up someone to talk to us about Chat GPT. This person has been on all over LinkedIn.
He's also got an integration with ServiceNow, so that's going to be really interesting to learn more about. So, my name's James Downs.
I'm Russ Shear.
This has been the Service Ducks. That's all for today's podcast. Thank you for listening, and if you want to get your question answered by the Service Ducks, get in touch through Talk to the Duck at service-ducks.com, or just use one of the links below.